extremely important broadcast this morning, and I'm delighted to welcome to the show for the first time filmmaker Joel Gilbert, and we're joined by Larry Klayman. Gentlemen, good morning. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having us.
It's really wonderful to have you both on, and the importance of this broadcast cannot be overstated. Joel, our viewers will recognize you. You've made a number of films and you've written books about Barack Obama's real father, so many countless third rail type topics. Your latest film, The Trayvon Hoax, is perhaps the most important, most controversial yet. Why don't you give us a little background on the film, which I've just viewed last night, and I'm really anxious for our viewers to see this.
Okay, thanks. Well, of course, they can see the trailer and read about the film, watch it even online at thetrayvonhoax.com. And the full title is The Trayvon Hoax, Unmasking the Witness Fraud That Divided America. And this film is an expose. It's a journalistic triumph, really, based on a year of research. And it shows, I demonstrate conclusively with all the evidence, that the Trayvon Martin story of him being shot in the Zimmerman trial were all based on a hoax. And the hoax literally divided America. Prior to the Zimmerman trial, blacks and whites both viewed race relations as positive, and that's been negative ever since. And this led directly to the Ferguson effect, hands up, don't shoot, Freddie Gray. It's been a crime disaster, 33% rise in homicides, and no one has suffered more from this hoax than the black youth of America. This is also where all the fake news started in the modern era from the Zimmerman case, and the race hoaxes started from this case. So the Trayvon hoax is two things. It's the story that I tell through my investigative journalism, how Rachel Jeantel, the plus-sized Haitian-American girl that came to court and claimed she was on the phone with Trayvon, that she was his girlfriend, I'm showing that that was not his girlfriend and she was not on the phone with him. And I found the real phone witness named Diamond Eugene. It's about the substitution of a fake witness for a real witness. And secondly, the Trayvon hoax is the name I give to the hoax that the media plays on black Americans every day, that there are armed white men in the streets who are looking for people with dark skin color so they can shoot them. Therefore, you must seek shelter on the left and vote Democrat. Jesse Smollett, on and on. All these race hoaxes the media propagates to fuel this race-fueled narrative why they need to vote Democrat.
It's one thing I want to add there, because I've seen the film too, but what Joel is trying to say as well is that Rachel Jeantel submitted false, perjurous testimony. So this was a conspiracy, not conspiracy theory, but an actual conspiracy to defraud the court. And the consequence of this is that George Zimmerman could have done life imprisonment, and in Florida, which is my native home state, you can even get the death penalty. So that's how serious this is.
Well, and even without a conviction, Larry, George Zimmerman has been subjected to ridicule. He's been essentially the most hated man in America. And this is a guy who was walking through his neighborhood on a rainy evening, saw someone who, irrespective of his color, was standing in the dark, in the rain, at night. Didn't make much sense. He went to look into it because there had been some crime in the neighborhood. Suddenly he's getting pummeled, and his nose is getting smashed in by a guy who is substantially taller than him, very aggressively banging his head on the sidewalk to the extent that Mr. Zimmerman was fearful for his life, particularly once his legally carried firearm was exposed to the attacker. He had to presume that this person was going to take the gun and try to shoot him. It was kill or be killed.
Right, so George Zimmerman does appear in the film, and he gives the firsthand account. No one has really heard from him because he did not even testify at his own trial. So we get the blow-by-blow account of what really happened. And then I go into a tremendous amount of research where I looked at Trayvon Martin's 750-page cell phone records, all the social media of his friends and family, and I discovered that the real story was just there for the taking. The media easily could have figured this thing out, that Rachel Jeantel was a fake witness. She was substituted for the real phone witness, Diamond Eugene. And I even show who knew about it, which includes Trayvon's mother, Sabrina Fulton, who is now running for office, believe it or not, in Florida for Miami-Dade commissioner. And it just exposes the real story. And the real story in the end is that it was a fraud on America. Trayvon Martin was used, as was George Zimmerman, who was, by the way, a social activist, Obama supporter. He spent his free time and extra money actually mentoring black kids whose fathers were in prison. That's how much of a minority advocate he was, in addition to being Hispanic himself. But this was a fraud on America that the left put in this agenda. Initially, it was just to get Barack Obama reelected. They knew that the black base that supported Obama in 2008 was not necessarily going to come out for him because everything had gotten worse. The economy had flatlined. Their inner cities were being flooded with illegals that were driving down wages and taking their jobs. And the media wanted to inflame black voters. And when you look at the film, you realize what an evil idea it was to use the tragic death of a black teen who was very troubled to put a Hispanic man in prison for no greater good than controlling black voters. And as we know,
the left,
yeah, go ahead.
You know, and I might add, the left, it's not just about Democrats and votes. It's also about causing violence, causing civil war, causing mayhem, death, and destruction. The left wants to do that. They want, in my opinion, I'm not speaking for Joel, to destroy this country, to take it down to ground zero, and then take control of it with their socialist concept of what this country should be about, notwithstanding all the other strange way out concepts. And it's the state of Florida, which knew or should have known. And you remember, I ran for the Senate in 2003, 2004 in Florida. I'm proud of the state of Florida. It still has some freedom. But the prosecutors in the state knew or should have known that they were presenting false evidence to the prosecutors. They have tremendous, to the jury, they have tremendous potential legal liability here. And Joel gets credit. He uncovered this. No one else has done it up to this point.
It really was phenomenal detective work, Joel. And as you said, if you could figure it out, certainly the police, the prosecutors, the FBI, somebody should have been able to figure it out. The more sinister aspect is that you've uncovered evidence that indicates the prosecutors knowingly withheld this exculpatory information that would have proven that George Zimmerman was acting in self-defense, and they railroaded the guy. Even though he avoided the death penalty, he absolutely was the most hated man in America. He's lost his wife, he's lost his employment, he's been put through extensive mental anguish, and of course, he was the target of potential violence simply because of what he was being accused of in, as you've accurately called it, Joel, the fake news. We saw this picture that was published, which shows George Zimmerman looking quite sinister, and it shows maybe like a 13-year-old Trayvon Martin smiling. It's interesting that the press didn't publish any of the photos of him brandishing weapons, cash, gang signs, playing with guns, playing with friends who are now in jail. This is a real manipulation of everyone's perception, isn't it?
Yeah, the media malfeasance was just incredible. As I said, this is really where the fake news era began. And as a reminder for your audience, this is important. The timeline of what happened is Trayvon was shot and killed February 26, 2012. The police investigated for 2 full weeks. They came up with a statement. They said, physical evidence, 911 calls, eyewitnesses, Jonathan Good, all point to self-defense. Not stand your ground, self-defense. It was over. A week later, the family attorney, Benjamin Crump, has a press conference where he holds up a digital recorder and says, we just discovered Trayvon's girlfriend last night, and she did this phone interview, and he played some excerpts where she said some things that didn't even make sense. And that was enough for the media to run with it. Next day, Barack Obama says, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. LeBron James gets on board. And then they appoint a special prosecutor. And then, at the time, Crump said, this girl is 16 years old. Her name is Diamond Eugene. 2 weeks later, Rachel Gentile shows up and says, I'm Diamond Eugene. I just lied about my name. I'm 18. And she gives this ridiculous interview to prosecutors. And at the end of that interview, she actually confessed. It's in the trailer. You can see it at the TrayvonHoax.com. She says, I feel real guilty 6 times. And the prosecutors say, why do you feel guilty? She says, I know about it. He goes, huh? I know about it. She actually confessed she felt guilty about lying. Yeah. And then a year later, of course, she shows up in court. And the prosecution withheld all the evidence up until the last second. The defense had to spend 2/3 of their time in court fighting to get evidence. They even told the defense that Rachel was 16 years old. They were not allowed to talk to her because she was a minor, even though they knew she was 18. So they went to tremendous efforts to prevent the defense from discovering what I discovered in only a few months.
That's a tremendous conspiracy. I mean, look at the film. People need to watch it, read the book. This guy Crump, the lawyer, he barely can put a sentence together. I would say that Joe Biden looks like a genius compared to this guy in terms of talking. And you've got also Sharpton in there, Jesse Jackson. I mean, this was all a cash cow for all of them. Crump became, quote, famous, I would say infamous. Joel can talk about that. And this was the launching pad for this race war that has divided this country and gets worse and worse each day. And the irony is, not just the irony, but the outrage, is that white people were being blamed for this, and George is half Hispanic. And, you know, he's not, technically speaking, an Anglo, okay, as we say in Florida. So the whole thing was a sham top to bottom, as Woody Allen would say, a mockery of a travesty of a sham of a double mockery of a travesty. That's what it was. But it wasn't funny. And right. I don't think Woody Allen would think it would be funny either.
Yeah, and there's I want to point out, this film is filled with evidence, handwriting analysis, DNA. We even find the characters tripping up among themselves. Diamond Eugene, I got into her social media archives, and she tells the entire story. She's tweeting the entire time, 50 times a day, every 20 minutes that she's awake. And Crump himself even slips up. He was talking to Court TV, and he accidentally blurted out, he said, this interview with Diamond happened because we pushed her making a statement.
Right.
And that contradicts what he said later, which he said, Tracy Martin, Trayvon's father, just found this phone number last night. And I have Diamond's phone records, the girlfriend. I got her phone records, and it shows that Trayvon's friends and Trayvon's father were pressuring her for 3 weeks. She tried to disappear. She didn't want to come forward. She tried to disappear. They forced her to come forward. When she did, she made that statement to Crump on the phone, pretty much just agreeing with what Crump said and repeating back to him the narrative. A week later, they want her to show up to talk to prosecutors, and she disappears. And Diamond is substituted in. You can see it all in the movie. And, of course, Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon's mother, knew about the switch. Not in advance, but she knew about it when it happened. And she did not come forward and tell everybody, look, this is a hoax.
What could be worse, guys, than being false witness, giving false testimony? You know, this is in the Ten Commandments. And actually, Joel quoted, some biblical verses at his press conference the other day. I was there. But that's the most egregious thing that you can do, is to bear false witness against somebody in a way that if this had succeeded, George Zimmerman could have been executed in Old Sparky in Florida.
People need to let that sink in, Larry. People really need to let that sink in, because now we've got Sabrina Fulton running for, what is she running for? She's running for Congress in Florida?
No, Miami-Dade Commissioner. Miami-Dade Commissioner.
So that means we've got someone who would, if she wins, she's arrived at that position by lying, by trying to get another person put to death over a matter that really her son started by beating the crap out of George Zimmerman. If he had just walked away and not started punching George Zimmerman in the face, George Zimmerman would not have shot him. And I do believe George Zimmerman had good reason to fear for his life. So if Ms. Fulton wins, we've got a commissioner who is a fraudster, who's willing to not just put somebody in jail, but put somebody to death in the furtherance of her own agenda. That's incredibly scary and gives us some insight.
And we also remember that the prosecutor, refresh my recollection, Joel, of what her name is, who basically fudged everything.
Well, Angela Corey was the special prosecutor.
Angela Corey, I should remember, because at Freedom Watch we filed a complaint against her at the time, an ethics complaint, which went nowhere. And, she knew, or should have known, that this whole thing was a fraud. If not in the beginning, then certainly as the thing progressed.
Look, these guys had professional investigators, subpoena powers that I could only envy. And all I did was look at the public information. I listened to the interview with Rachel. She's confessing. She says, I know about it. I look at the phone records of Diamond. She's calling Rachel Gentile every day. I look at the phone records of Trayvon Martin. I see that he's calling Diamond. I'm looking at all the phone records together, and it tells a story with the social media that the state of Florida, with all their investigative powers, How could they not have known? Does it explain why they withheld so much evidence from the defense?
Well, I'll tell you what it explains. And I consider myself to be a civil rights lawyer. I'm a Jewish Christian. I'm a minority. So I don't mean this. But see, everybody today is a racist. Okay, if you question anybody, if you questioned Obama, you questioned the prosecutors in Florida, if you questioned Trayvon's family, you're a racist. And unfortunately, there are minorities in this country today that have more rights than everybody else. And this is a good example of it, because they can walk off scot-free, laughing all the way to the bank, and George Zimmerman could have wound up in the electric chair. And that's why this is so serious.
Yeah.
And that's why this thing needs to be pursued. It's why I thank Radio America, where I am today, a great network. I have my show on there, Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. I'm doing a little promo. It's pictures behind me. And you, Jason, Crowdsource the Truth, and you, Joel, who are a very fine, courageous filmmaker in Hollywood, a protected species from the right, but an endangered species from the left. And the major media needs to get this out there. Fox needs to develop some cojones and put Joel on. I mean, they are afraid of their shadow when it comes to things like this, but it's time that the truth gets out.
Yeah,
well, I'll tell you the most ridiculous.
Sorry, Joel. I fear that Fox will not do that because this information is so explosive, and that's why it's very important that anyone watching us right now should go to the TrayvonHoax.com, click that buy button, and you can choose to buy the book, the DVD, the ebook, and you can even watch the movie on demand on Vimeo. So if you're on your iPad, your phone, your computer, your smart TV, whatever it is, you really do need to see this movie because it was stunning to me, the revelations, and the work that you did was just really, you're a legend, Joel, both of you guys. I want to talk for a second about how the media played in this, how, you know, they tried to make it seem like this was a young kid who was just buying candy and a drink, but in fact, he and his friends were mixing a chemical concoction that used Skittles, high sugar soft drinks, and codeine to get them high. These were guys that were just basically growing up into their drug dealing, gun dealing world. And you point out in the film that it's really the democratic policies in these cities that they're growing up in that have imprisoned the parents and created generations of fatherless young men who have no guidance whatsoever. And then we've got the media and the government luring them into hoaxes like this, creating this false reality for people to believe that would scare a young black man into thinking that the cops want to kill him. I mean, this is how you stoke racial violence.
Right. I mean, I would say, and I say in the film, that Trayvon Martin's legacy was stolen by left-wing activists and the Democrat Party and the media for the political agendas. His real legacy is really a teachable moment, that the problem for young black youth in the inner city is not armed white men in the streets. It's the lack of strong black men in the home that Trayvon needed to guide him away from drugs, gangs, fighting, and so much more. And in terms of the media, they didn't want to know any of this. And it continues to this day. I was at a press conference 3 days ago where I invited the entire press, PR Newswire, National Press Club, and I'm revealing that this very case that divided America was a total hoax. They're still talking about it with the gun control debate. They're talking about Trayvon Martin case. Kamala Harris is tweeting about Trayvon Martin. This is so relevant. It's what divided America for no reason. And all the media did, they didn't come to my press conference. Instead, they were obsessing over a book about Brett Kavanaugh, where there was an alleged victim of a sexual harassment that said, I don't even remember being sexually harassed. That was the news that they were covering, what was 30 years ago that no one remembers, where I have the story of the year, if not for the century, of about how America got played. America got played by an epic race hoax.
And what you see happening with Kavanaugh, who, by the way, is a judge I don't even like, but I sympathize with him with regard to what's going on. This is, in fact, the generation. I mean, this is what happens when you let Trayvon scandals fester like they do. Then everybody becomes game, even Supreme Court justices. You know, Joel, you ought to release this in France. You can call it L'Affaire Trayvon. Okay, you know, L'Affaire Dreyfus, you speak French. Okay.
Oui.
You know, the Dreyfus affair in France, when this guy was railroaded, you know, into Devil's Island prison, okay, and he was innocent. And that's exactly what could have happened to George Zimmerman. By the grace of God, He's out there, but his life has been destroyed. It's in ashes, and his family is not feeling much better.
There's something that I would like to see happen, but I have no idea how we as citizens could affect this change. But I think it would be very beneficial if the law in the United States worked in such a way that if a criminal prosecutor was found to have knowingly withheld evidence, like, that person should be charged with whatever the crime. In other words, if someone withholds evidence to try to get the death penalty for George Zimmerman, that prosecutor should face the death penalty. That would surely cause prosecutors to think twice.
They should. And for instance, Klayman Bundy and his family, I'm seeking to have them held accountable. It's not going to happen with this Attorney General and the Deep State Justice Department. We've seen them in action in the last few weeks, or should I say inaction, with regard to Comey, Rosenstein, and others. But yes, they should be held accountable. And this is why our legal system is completely, it's more than broken. It's corrupt to the core. And they can get away with it. They claim they have immunity. They walk off scot-free. And every day, Jason and Joel, in family court, for instance, which is the worst of the worst. I've often said if I had to be a family lawyer, I'd rather flip hamburgers at McDonald's. Every day, spouses are making false claims against their ex, claiming that they committed child abuse, they did all kinds of things like this. And if those things stick, those people could go away for life. But when it's determined, usually it's the woman who does this, usually, not always, but usually, because men have lesser rights in the family law system, the way it works. When they get caught doing these things, they walk off scot-free laughing, just like everybody did here. So it's not an isolated instance with what happened to George Zimmerman, but what is really terrible about this is that it's stoked a race war, which is just getting worse and worse and worse. But it happens every day in our legal system, and there's no recourse for it in terms of the practice.
Yeah. And by the way, as scary as it looks when you look at these Democrat candidates claiming they're going to, open the borders, raise taxes, all these crazy things they want to do, people forget that we lived this with Obama for 8 years. It was a lawless Department of Justice. They even sent the Community Relations Service down from the DOJ to Sanford, Florida, allegedly to investigate. And what they really did is they helped organize protests. So this was an agenda-driven, nationally driven agenda case where Trayvon was used, Zimmerman was used to further this radical leftist agenda. And they knew that if they could divide the country and manipulate black voters with this hoax, they could get away with it. And I can tell you, I'm getting a lot of emails already from African-American kids and teenagers around the country that have seen the film and read the book. And they're mad as hell. They get it. They said, man, we got played. We are unhappy. Yeah. This is shocking. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, and African Americans should be the most angry. And I know people like my client and friend Demetric Penny, a cop in Dallas, because of what was ignited in the Trayvon matter. There's a direct link with 5 cops that were killed in Dallas. He was assaulted because it spread. It spread from Florida to Ferguson to Baltimore to Dallas. It's still spreading today. And as Joel points out in the film, this was the genesis of Black Lives Matter. It ginned up the new Black Panthers Party, gave them oxygen. They were dying on the vine. Farrakhan got involved, called for the death of cops, and he succeeded in Dallas just a few days before that massacre. He was calling to kill cops. And this is what is destroying this country. This week, I'm in Washington, D.C. Joel was in Washington, D.C. I go around here. I've said it many times. This place is pure evil. It is pure evil. There's a black cloud hanging over this city. And you just watch TV every day. Doesn't matter whether you're watching CNBC, MSNBC, Fox, whatever. Okay, there is no truth. There's no justice. There's no nothing. Yet the people on these cable stations continue to peddle to increase their ratings and advertising dollars, that things will get different. They're not getting different. They're getting worse. And that's why you need a Joel Gilbert. It's why you need a Jason Goodman. It's why you need a Larry Klayman and a Freedom Watch, because we're doing it for real. We're not doing it for show. Yeah. We're not doing it to boost our ratings and to jingle the change. We're doing it because we want this country to be put right.
And you know, it's really, I'm just so overwhelmed by this film, Joel. People really do need to watch it. It's incredibly important. I want everyone to go to thetrayvonhoax.com and purchase the film and watch it and read the book, because you're going to be really blown away. Now, I also want people to remember this all took place around 2011. And Joel, I first became aware of you when I saw you being interviewed on InfoWars, and I hadn't started watching InfoWars until about 2015. And irrespective of what anyone might think about Alex Jones, InfoWars really was kind of the Kleenex of independent news. They grew up to the biggest and had the most influence. Many say they even had an influence on the 2016 election. And we see how that organization and many of its key players have been targeted and destroyed. So the other thing that was really had a huge impact on me in watching your movie was how media has evolved in the 7 years since this all took place. And without the independent media, we wouldn't know about this. I mean, you go through step by step exactly how you broke this down. You're not some, you know, telekinetic wizard who pulled this out of the ether. You just did the work and went through the process that really the police should have gone through. The thing we should also mention is that this lawyer, Benjamin Crump, has now become a producer, an actor, a writer. He's right here in the media. Now, that's very interesting. What do we think about that and what that you know, could hold in future as far as media manipulation goes?
Jason, one thing, we're running a little bit out of time now, and we're going to pick this up on my radio show, Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. You're going to co-host with me along with Joel. He's going to be on that show. But we have to move on right now in terms of the time. And I hope that you're going to have Joel back.
Absolutely.
And follow up on this. But please tune in to Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, as well as Crowdsource the Truth, and get more of this. And of course, we're on Sunday on Radio America, and you get it on freedomwatchusa.org, on our blog, and also on Radio America's podcast, rather.
Absolutely.
So we're going to have to wrap it up for right now.
Okay, we'll close it out.
Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to have you, Joel and Larry, and I want everybody to remember to visit freedomwatchusa.org. These types of cases would not be coming to the fore without people like Larry and his team, and of course, everyone's got to see the movie, The Trayvon Hoax. I think you're going to be stunned when you see it, and as Joel said, black people in America are going to be really upset when they learn how they've been manipulated. I want to thank my guests and everybody for watching. And remember, the independent media cannot survive without your support. So please go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I'll see everybody at 1 o'clock with David Hawkins. Thanks for watching.